So ever since EDC happened and that little girl or whatever, that things change, but they shouldn't have to change. They should have just updated the rules a little.
The County Board of Supervisors are 5 members that run about 8 to 10 million people that live in the county, 58 cities. They set a task force up to look at electronic concerts.
A task force was convened to get people who actually had the expertise to craft a response to how to handle drug use at these kinds of events.
I think after EDC, my understanding is they were overwhelmed with the numbers of patients, the numbers of off-site transports. When the 911 system is called, the paramedic gets there and assesses the patient. If they're altered or confused, they have to go to the hospital. They don't have on-site nurses or doctors. Part of the job of the Rave task force was to look into this and say, hey, what are we doing right? What are we doing wrong?
So as part of my work with Drug Policy Alliance, we did a series of conferences called New Directions, which was specifically about kind of building a public health approach to drug policy. So when I heard about this task force and it was being run by the Department of Public Health in LA, I was like, this is great news, and this is unlike anything that's happening anywhere else in the country.
Harm reductionists were being actively invited to that table, and members of the dance community were being actively invited to that discussion. This really was a totally new way of responding to a problem related to people using drugs.
And so the end result was a group of recommendations to ensure that there were certain guidelines for promoters and certain expectations from those who were allowing the event to go forward. They were going to make sure that there should be an age limit, 18. There should be no one admitted without identification, a picture identification.
Mobile event safety support, and it looks like an ambulance, but it really isn't. What this has in it is everything that the ambulances don't have. Paramedics in California can't hand out Tylenols. It's outside their scope of practice. They're not allowed to suture in the field. We don't want to call it a hospital, but we call it a care center because it's more than first aid. We provide advanced level of care, but it allows us to set up a little mini care center basically anywhere we go to take care of a crowd of typically 50,000. The biggest thing from the medical side was having on-site nurses and doctors. For smaller events, you don't really need that. But when you're growing to a size of what EDC did, 100,000 or more people, you have to have it.
So there's different work groups, and they all have the mission to improve the safety, but through their particular expertise. So there's a public education work group, and there's a harm reduction work group.
There's now this open dialogue within the Rave task force about harm reduction. The fact that there is a harm reduction group is almost staggering, given the history of trying to integrate harm reduction into events.
Now harm reduction isn't a bad word anymore, and people are actually asking for it.
We're working on a public service announcement that's going to feature a bunch of the famous DJs, a bunch of the DJs that performed at Electric Daisy Carnival, with a message, not of a don't do drugs message, but of kind of a more well-rounded harm reduction message, and hoping to create it in a format that'll actually be appealing to to the audience that it's intended for.
I plan on bringing my neurobiology of drug abuse knowledge to the task force and help to develop some of the materials that we're going to use for public education. So things like ecstasy overdoses, what does it actually mean?
Among the most interesting of the recommendations operations was to distribute materials that would educate people attending the dance parties about how to be safe if they made the choice to use drugs, specifically ecstasy.
All right. My name is Omar de la Cruz. I'm with the San Fernando Valley Partnership. We are assisting the LA County Department of Health. The ecstasy usage in our community has been on the rise, so we're passing out these cards that, that talk about ecstasy and what are the signs of someone who's overdosing.
You want me to read everything? Okay, what are the effects? Effects felt within 20 to 40 minutes, peak within 1.5 hours, and subside after 3 to 5.
People come in and they say, hey, I took this blue pill, or I took this white pill with this logo on it. We don't know if it's 100% ecstasy, or we don't know if there's something else in it.
Ecstasy also increases the heart rate, blood pressure, blood temperature, and muscle tension like teeth grinding.
It can cause severe hyponatremia, which is really low sodiums.
Come on, turn around.
Okay, think it through, know the facts, so you and your friends can make informed decisions and stay safe together.
Staying hydrated, don't mix it with other stuff. A lot of the patients that we end up seeing is because they're using ecstasy and they're combining it with something else, whether it's cocaine or alcohol. And when you get that additive effect, that's really when we get into a lot of the problems.
Don't take it all. How to minimize it. Do not take. Stay hydrated. Drink beer.
I honestly think it's the funniest thing I've ever seen.
Why is it funny?
Because good for them telling us how to take ecstasy. Might as well just hand it out to us in public. Honestly, I think it's a bad thing, but if anything, it's for the stupid idiots that don't know what they're doing, and it could be a good thing too.
I would have to respectfully disagree. I think if there's no hiding that people are gonna take ecstasy, so the Department of Health, I think it's responsible for them to give important information on how to do it safely.
And talk openly about drugs. Yeah, people use this drug, and yes, it has these problems, and here are the major things that people can do to prevent that. So that's not the way we do drug education in this country. The way that we do drug education in this country is completely a just say no, abstinence only, don't try drugs approach. Talk up the dangers and the criminal aspects and everything negative around the drug scene. Make drug use more dangerous and make drug use scary. Then maybe we'll scare people away from it and they won't use it.
The typical information about drugs that you get from government entities, the way that it's packaged means that users of that drug just kind of turn off from it because they're like, well, I've done it a million times and I'm fine. These people are making a choice. We may not like their choice to use something, but given that they're going to do it, we need to make sure that it happens in the safest way possible, that they don't hurt themselves or others. So it's a crucial change in perspective, and that's really been the main challenge in getting harm reduction information out into the dance music community.
Honestly, this is a lot better than how the government usually handles it.
This is the first time I've seen people do give flyers up like this. I've never seen it on any event like this before.
This is not information that has been readily available in the past. So, just the fact that that's now part of the conversation, I think is a huge step forward culturally.
To have the Department of Public Health put their stamp of approval on this task force really represented to me a sea change in how the Department of Public Health approached the reality of drug use among young people in Los Angeles. It really represented a whole new way of thinking about and addressing that specific issue.